when you start trying to pick up a log or feeling what it would have taken to have come in here and cut down the trees to plant gardens, and instead of just burning and wasting the logs, they ingeniously built houses and built barns and figured out how to raise food or hunt and fish and collect berries and nuts. I mean,
and make their own tools.
They made their own tools. I mean, you didn't come in here. I think that our ancestors are some of the most ingenious, creative, industrious, entrepreneurial people that have ever existed anywhere. And I say that because if you came in on the east, if you landed on the East Coast, you were organized as a boatload of people. And so there was a carpenter, there was a blacksmith, there was a doctor, there were the various skills. And those people primarily then and still today lived in towns and villages. So they collectively had the skills. When people came primarily as individual and very small groups over the mountains, they didn't have that community. They were very much more isolated and remote.
Very independent.
And very much had to be. And they didn't have...
Had to be independent.
Yeah. If you were on the East Coast, you could wait for a sail ship to bring you whatever was available anywhere else in the world. There were no sail ships on this side of the mountains. Yeah. So if you wanted something, you either brought it with you, and you had to carry it because there was no caravans, or you had to make it, or you had to learn to do without. Quick illustration of the significant difference between our ancestors and our ancestors on the other side of the mountain. If you're in Williamsburg and you want a wool coat, you go to the farmer and you get some wool. Then you go to the carding mill and they card it, clean it. Then you go to the spinner and she spins the wool. Then you go to the weaver and they weave the material. Now you go to a tailor or a seamstress and they make you a coat. You go to somewhere else for some buttons and you go to somewhere else for some fur. Now, if you're this lady on our ancestors, on this side of the mountain, and you want a wool coat, she had to be able to do all of those tasks. There is no community. There is no group of artisans. She has to be able to do all of those things. And she doesn't do it. She doesn't do it on Tuesday and take that day off because she's cooking. She's taking care of the garden. She's doing all of the other. So she makes her coat at the end of the day after all of her arduous other chores. And her husband is making furniture or buckets or other implements that are essential. So it seems to me that when you get that picture of the isolation, of the remoteness, of the ingenious independence, and the ruggedness, you start understanding why we should be immensely proud of these men and women. Even when the people went west, they went west in caravans, the covered wagons. Mm-hmm. There has been no group of people in my mind that are more rugged and independent.
And you're hoping the school
And I'm
children...
hoping that is instilled back in our school children and their parents. I mean, that's, to me, that's why we say mountaineers are always free. Well, my gosh, we're not free today. We're dependent on everybody. And it's getting worse. So this is our humble effort to try to not only show the implements of the past, which are quite remarkable, but more important, the character of these people, which is greatly to be emulated. They're fabulous people. Their story has really never been told. It's told, unfortunately, through the blood and the battles of Union and management, or the Hatfield and McCoy. But the real story occurs before all of those. Mm-hmm. Could you have been a Hatfield? Could you have been a McCoy? Could you have built your own home? Could you have provided the food? Could you have protected your children? Could you have done all of those things? And when you do this, you suddenly say, my gosh, these are wonderful people. Now, obviously, we don't want to return to the good old days, because the good old days really weren't that good without electricity, without modern inventions and conveniences. But the people were fantastic. So the other aspect of the museum, Jack, is that we believe that all of us can learn how to adapt and deal with change. And our ancestors, they weren't Amish. They weren't people who didn't embrace new things. I can assure you, our ancestors dropped the axe and the crosscut saw in a heartbeat when a chainsaw became available, or mechanical tools. In fact, they were the ones who were trying to figure out how to harness water to run sawmills, to run grist mills. I mean, these are the entrepreneurs, people who are saying, "Hi, there's now enough people in the area that we need to have a sawmill, we need to have a country store." We need to have a place to grind our corn. That's what an entrepreneur is. Sure. They couldn't spell it, neither can I, but they were one. Yeah. And so it's if you've been involved in as many, say, the whale organizations in West Virginia as I have, you sometimes worry that we've lost the battle with the present generation. So I'm just trying to make sure that the next generation, we might understand why they need to get an education, not just because the law requires it, but because it enables you to have a quality of life. We tend to forget. Colleges and universities in this great country weren't formed to enable people to earn a living. The colleges and universities around the world have always been formed by for the most part, wealthy people who were wanting to educate their children to understand how to enjoy life. The Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts and the Harvards and the Yales and all those places either were to create training ministers, but they were where wealthy people went in order to learn how to enjoy life and manage life. And sometimes we tend to forget the importance of an education, and so. That's what the farm, and that's why it's such an important thing in my mind. And I hope, and I even pray, that I can cause other people to believe in the mission and the purpose of the farm, and help us financially take it into the future.